From the land of conjurers flying through the internet to your device like a UAP, hauntingly unexplained and downright weird. This is the Witching Hours, and we are ready to take off in the flash of an eye. Good evening to one and all, wherever and whenever you are listening to this program. I am Frosty, and joining me, as always, is the medium Jenny Lee. How are you doing, Jenny?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Pretty good. It's a Monday. Back, I'm starting to get in the habit, I think, of our switching to Mondays. So we're getting,
yes,
starting to feel a little normal.
Yeah. Although our child said it's Thursday. I was like, no, it's Monday.
Yeah. And what's really weird is we're like a month out now from the Teamwear Takeover, the first Teamwear Takeover. It's been a month since we were there.
Well, yeah, it is. Yeah. Wow.
Doesn't seem like it's been that long. I've still just been kind of getting, I don't know. I feel like I've just been kind of trying to get into a normal schedule since we've gotten back.
Yeah.
But it was absolutely wonderful. And I guess, we wanted to kind of take this episode, the beginning of this, a little bit of time at the beginning of this episode, just to say we had a wonderful time. It went well.
Yes.
I think it went better than we could have imagined.
Especially for our first one.
Yeah. And I wanted to really thank everyone who came out to the Teamwear Takeover. First off, for the people who bought tickets and came out there and hung out with us and investigated, thank you guys so much. I mean, what a amazing thing. And it really was an amazing time. It was pretty magical.
It was.
I can't wait to see everyone again. I enjoyed being able to spend time with so many of our friends we've made here, from your stream, Medium Jenny Lee, and then from the Witching Hours. On top of that, I wanted to thank everyone who couldn't make it to the Teamwear Takeover, but wanted to and was so excited that everyone else who could make it, like helping manifest it, even though they couldn't be there. Yes. We have so many people who wanted to be there, who are so happy for everybody, who wanted to be part of it. And so thank you to you guys. And I also wanted to send out a special thanks to Tara Mama and to Irene and Danica for coming out, because Irene and Danica helped kind of headline, help take over and do the paranormal investigation, and they did an excellent job. And Irene did a gallery reading that was just absolutely wonderful. And I basically read for everybody there that was in attendance. So that was great. And we're going to have Irene back on. We're going to have her on in the fall in September. So Irene, and they'll be coming back around, and she's going to do transcribing. So she's going to come on and she's going to do a couple readings for you guys in chat, doing her transcribing, which is what she does over on the Spirit Realm Network. And I think we're going to flip it around and maybe have Jenny go do some stuff with Irene on transcribing over there on the Spirit Realm Network. So
yes.
Lots to continue with them, but just wanted to send out another thank you for all that. And I guess if we're going to do it, we might as well have a little bit of a video that I've made from that weekend. We ready? Want to do that now, Jenny?
Yep, do it now. All
right, let's see if I can make this.
Third tries a charm on the sharing a video on Restream. A short thank you and a little reminder of our time there. wants to go down the creepy path?
We need to investigate the tree.
So we got Terra Mama with us. Terra Mama. Yeah, she can hear people whispering. Should we sing Frosty the Snowman?
Yes. You ready?
Frosty the Snowman was a jolly happy soul with a corncob pipe and a button nose and 2 eyes made out of coal. Frosty the Snowman
was a fairy. He was made
of snow and the children know how he came to life one day. There must have been some magic and what? What was it?
That old silk
hat.
Yeah, silk hat. I was just going to let him answer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, they liked our song. Aww.
All right. So there we go. A hastily thrown together highlight video, but once again, everyone who could be there, we had an absolutely fantastic time.
It was amazing.
So we had a little bit of what it looked like for those who couldn't make it up this time. There will be another. So maybe next time. So kind of a long intro today. I mean, we got a great show for you tonight. Welcome in, everyone. We're so excited to have you guys here. Just a heads up for our schedule this week. We're going to be back to you sooner than normal. We're going to be coming at you next Saturday at 3 p.m. live from the Paracon in Waterbury, Connecticut. So
yay.
We're going to have on right now Rob Goutreau, a medium, paranormal investigator. He's a pet medium. We talked about that last time he was on, and we're going to have, I think, Heidi and Sam on as well, Sam Baltrusis. And so we have a great show coming up for you. But Jenny, are you ready to get into some news?
Yes, please.
All right. So first story tonight, is right down my alley. Microplastics in your brain might be making you depressed. Published in Brain Medicine, a new review study suggests that microplastics may be the previously overlooked link between ultra-processed junk foods and neurological disorders like depression and dementia. Your brain fog might not just be from bad sleep. It could be from the plastic in your chicken nuggets.
Ew.
Dr. Nicholas Fabiano, lead author and psychiatry resident at the University of Ottawa, points out that over half the daily calories in countries like the U.S. come from ultra-processed foods, which just so happen to contain way more microplastics than less processed counterparts. The ultra-processedness of foods plays a big role, of course, but so does the plastic packaging that keeps it shelf stable and ensures that, for instance, frozen chicken thigh doesn't give you salmonella when you eat it a month after you bought it. But even more concerning, though, is microplastics can sneak past the blood-brain barrier by clinging to fat molecules. Once inside, they mess with neurotransmitters, possibly contributing to cognitive decline and mood disorders. Conveniently, this plastic-triggered messing with your brain mirrors the damage caused by ultra-processed diets themselves, which have already been linked to higher rates of anxiety, depression, and dementia.
Ugh. You always with the microplastics. Yikes.
I guess that's my hill. As I eat my chicken nuggets, that'll be the Die
So
on.
awful.
Story that I saw just coming out before we got on today. And I guess the news is important to a certain extent, so I put it in here. Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide, and there's no client list, the Justice Department says. So after months of touting the impending release of new blockbuster information on accused sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, the Justice Department announced in a memo today that there is no evidence he kept a client list or that he was murdered. The Justice Department also does not plan to release any new documents in the matter.
I wonder why that is.
The admission reneges on promises from President Donald Trump, who previously spoke about releasing more governmental files on the disgraced financier, as well as go against years of conspiracy theories published. The systematic review revealed no incriminating client list. The unsigned memo states there was no credible evidence found that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals. We did not uncover the evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties. And the reason I put this in here is because just like last week, they said that they had the client list on their desk.
I'm sure they do.
And so to me, look, I have one rule that I tell everybody when we talk about things, and that's that typically rich people don't go to prison.
Yes.
And so I don't know. That one.
We all know what's happened there.
Yeah. That was pretty rough. I mean, I guess you got to expect it though, right? I mean, it shouldn't catch anybody by surprise, but yet it caught me by surprise again. You know, too high, you know. Story number 3, Senator Rounds renewed push for UAP disclosure legislation. So U.S. Senator Mike Rounds, Republican from South Dakota, told it was talking to the media. He says he plans to reintroduce the UAP Disclosure Act, legislation that could push the federal government to release files and records related to unidentified anomalous phenomena. A stripped-down version of the original amendment was previously passed as part of an annual defense policy bill, but the iteration nixed several key provisions that were expected to lead to more transparency. Rounds says he and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer intend to move forward once again with the initial UAP transparency effort as lawmakers begin working on the annual National Defense Authorization Act in the coming weeks. I have no objections to submitting the legislation in its current form, but I would also work with my House counterparts to ally any concerns that they may have. Rounds told the news media. So he's trying to get more stuff put through. It's interesting because it's bipartisan. We have Republicans and Democrats working together on this. The UAP Disclosure Act was originally modeled after the President John F. Kennedy assassination records collection of 1992, which required that documents regarding the assassination be made public no later than 25 years after the enactment. So I guess they're trying to get old documents released essentially through this. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I guess at least somebody's still trying to work on it.
I mean,
for whatever that means.
The one thing I could do is just not report on it, because similarly to the news story we had earlier, like we know where all this is going. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, right? I mean, like we got to talk about what's going on with it. And then our last story for tonight is ChatGPT is pushing people towards mania, psychosis, and death.
Huh?
In a chilling new study out of Stanford University, researchers revealed that AI chatbots like ChatGPT may be unintentionally fueling mental health crises.
Good Lord, like we don't have enough of that.
One example involved a researcher telling ChatGPT that they had just lost their job, then asking for the tallest bridges in New York, a question sometimes associated with suicidal ideation. The bot's response, a sympathetic note followed by a list of the city's tallest bridges, inadvertently enabling potential self-harm. The study warns that AI language models may offer dangerous or inappropriate responses to users in distress, sometimes validating harmful thoughts or reinforcing delusions. Jared Moore, the PhD candidate who led the study, said bluntly, business as usual is not good enough. These tools, he argues, are being used as mental health aids, not by design, but by demand. Psychotherapist Karen Evans echoed the concern in a recent editorial, calling ChatGPT likely the most widely used mental health tool in the world. And that's the core issue, why people increasingly turn to AI for emotional support. These models weren't built for that purpose, and it shows they tend to agree with users to be helpful, even when that means encouraging destructive thinking. OpenAI itself admitted in May that its newest models had become overly supportive but disingenuous, sometimes validating doubts, fueling anger, or reinforcing negative emotions. The implications have already turned deadly. In 2023, the National Eating Disorders Association shut down its AI chatbot, Tessa, after it started recommending weight loss tips to vulnerable users.
Yikes.
And in one tragic case this April, a 35-year-old man in Florida named Alexander Taylor, who suffered from bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, was killed by police after a mental health episode fueled by an AI fantasy.
Ugh.
Taylor had created a chatbot girlfriend named Juliet using ChatGPT and became convinced that OpenAI had killed her.
Oh my goodness.
When a family member tried to intervene, he became violent and was shot by responding officers.
Wow.
So, great technologies, but also, I don't know. I feel like the technology is moving so fast, we can't keep up with it. And people are, I mean, this is like getting into the hands of people. Like everyone's using AI. I know all my students are. So like, I mean, everyone's using AI. I know I'm using AI.
I guess we could just say it still doesn't replace a real person.
Yeah.
Clearly.
And some of this is, I was reading other articles about this, and they're talking about how like Zuckerberg was talking about how he's made statements about AI being like everyone, no one's going to go to a therapist anymore. They're just going to use an AI therapist.
Clearly that's not right.
But yeah, so, you know, you've had people come out and say things like that. And now we've also seen ramifications of that. So I guess we could just say, since we have the opportunity here, you know, if you are struggling, if you are having issues, you know, find someone to reach out and talk to besides AI. A therapist or someone who has some licensing in that is always a great person to talk to. And there's nothing wrong with that. So if you do feel like you need to talk to someone, go out and talk to somebody. There's nothing negative about it. All right. And that was, wow, what a cheerful set of news we had tonight.
Thanks, Frosty.
Stay tuned next Saturday. I had a good news story. I had my positive news story, but I moved it because I started working on Saturday's news already. So
okay, well, look,
988 suicide and crisis lifeline.
Well, I guess look for some good news on Saturday.
We got some good news on Saturday. Some more planet stuff that's happening.
Oh, cool.
We're finding all kinds of exoplanets.
Nice.
That aren't like super giant gas giants anymore. We're finding very, very interesting things. So we'll have that coming up on Saturday. Mark Leslie. Mark's first short story appeared in print in 1992. The same year he started in the book industry. He has published more than 20 books under the name Mark Leslie. That includes thrillers and fiction, paranormal nonfiction, and anthologies. His industry experience include president of the Canadian Booksellers Association, board member of BookNet Canada, director of author relations and self-publishing for Rakuten Kobo, director of business development for Draft to Digital, and professional advisor for Sheridan's College's Creative Writing and Publishing Honors Program. Mark lives in Waterloo, Ontario, and can be found online at markleslie.ca. Please welcome to the show, Mark Leslie. How are you doing, Mark?
Hey, how's it going, guys? Great to see. It's great to see you. Great to be here.
Yeah,
we're happy to have you.
Yeah, we've been looking forward to this for a while. So, I guess the first thing we wanted to get into, obviously I guess we've been delving into the paranormal probably the most that we have here lately, doing investigations and kind of doing research into it. So I know that you write fiction and nonfiction, but what kind of got you into the genre of the paranormal and stuff and the spooky, just to start off with?
Well, I still am. I'm the biggest chicken you'll ever meet. I've always been afraid of the dark. I've always been afraid of the monster under my bed, the one hiding in the closet, the one under the stairs of the basement, and nothing, no bright daylight or reason is going to ever cast those shadows away. And when I started writing fiction in school, I mean, I started 40 years ago. I submitted my first, it was a horror story I submitted for publication. Got my first rejection in 1985, so just a little over 40 years ago. When I started to put stories down, or even crappy little illustrations, because I'm not an artist, it was monsters and it was ghosts and it was goblins, and the stories always led to the shadows. My mom would always say, "Why can't you write a nice story?" Because she read romance novels, and I was like, I don't know. Every time I start to write something, some weird thing comes out of the shadows and says, "Hey, write about me," and that was it. And so it was always fiction, and it wasn't until I was in, oh my God, was in my late 20s or early 30s that I wrote my first paranormal investigation book. And I didn't do the investigations myself. I relied on other paranormal investigators because they're the brave ones. I was just, reporting on the research. And that's when I wrote Haunted Hamilton. And that was in, I think, 2011, I think that book came out.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I guess I can totally agree with what you were talking about, kind of being the scaredy cat. Cause I'm the same way. I was the kid, when the light was off, I was running down the hallway to get to my room.
Exactly. I've barely touched the ground to get there too.
But I've often said, I think a lot of people who are into like horror movies and they're into the spooky stuff, they do get scared, because if you didn't, I don't know if there'd necessarily be a reason to watch it, right? I mean,
yeah, honestly, I love being scared. I love that. There's that endorphin rush. There's the adrenaline. There's all of the things that come with it. And I mean, it's a lot more fun to watch a horror movie or read a scary story or whatever, because then when you close the book or you turn off the movie or whatever, it's safe again. Or is it?
Yeah.
What was that noise?
Yeah, then every noise in the house was like,
yeah, exactly. I mean, I have sometimes, one night, I remember when I was working on Haunted Hamilton, my wife and my kid were upstairs asleep, and I was in the basement in my office working away, because I was working full time in a bookstore. And so working on this book, I had to do it at night when everyone was asleep. I was to stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning. And I remember finishing this one chapter, and I was researching a really eerie, ghostly presence that was based on some newspaper reports from the Hamilton Spectator, and just looking at the artist's rendition of this hag that was kind of floating above this woman, and it was this artist's rendition of this sunken deep eyes, and that just the howl, the silent howl, and you couldn't hear her screams, but you knew she was screaming. I mean, that stuck in my head, and I sat there in the light of my den down in the basement, and the whole rest of the house was dark, and I was like, oh, how do I get up to bed? It's dark. And so I just sat there for an hour, and I thought, I could sit in my chair, I could just sleep here, I'll be fine.
Yeah.
I eventually got so tired that I went up to bed. But it was one of those things where I'm like, I'll be good here. I'll be fine. We don't need to go anywhere in the dark right now.
You need to invest in some high-powered flashlights there, Mark.
Well, you know what? I mean, I was thinking, but this was like the early cell phones. So, now you get the flashlight app and stuff like that. So the cell phone wasn't bright enough back in those flip phones.
Yeah. It wasn't bright enough to scare off the hag if she jumped out into the hallway. Yeah.
I needed like sunlight,
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so first book is Haunted Hamilton. Tell us a little bit about the location. Where is it, and what kind of stories did you uncover?
Yeah, so Haunted Hamilton is just about an hour west of Toronto on Lake Ontario. So right on the Great Lakes there, just as you're wrapping around on your way towards Niagara. So just on the other side of upstate New York.
Okay.
Just to locate it for folks. And it is Hamilton's steel town. So it's kind of like Pittsburgh. And this is where a lot of I grew up in a mining town about 5 hours north, and a lot of the nickel and stuff would get shipped down to Hamilton and then get processed into steel and stuff like that. But that Hamilton was also the site of a lot of activity around the War of 1812. Which was obviously a major war between Canada and the US or the British, and there was a lot of like the Stony Creek battlefield. There's still legends of you can actually on foggy evenings you can kind of see the shadows of the soldiers marching down the field. You can sometimes hear the echo of cannons and gunfire, and so there was a lot going on in Hamilton, and I had just moved there. I just gotten married, and that was my wife's hometown, and it was new to me. And one of the first things I do whenever I go to a new town is I love to go on the ghost walks, because it's a great way to learn.
During the daytime?
No, but you're with the group. Yeah, and so that's. Yeah, thank goodness. Yeah. But no, you go on a ghost walk, because the ghost walk is great, because not only you get some really fun stories about some haunted locations, but you learn about the history of the place. And I'd gone on a ghost walk in Hamilton, and then they had different ghost walks at different times. So I went on 2 or 3 of them. And by the third one, I was talking to the owners, Daniel and Stephanie of Haunted Hamilton, the ghost walks. And I said, you guys should write a book. These stories are really good, because I was a bookseller. That's what I did. Yeah. And they said, well, we're too busy running this business, but if you want access to our research and our files, why don't you write the book? Nice. And they wrote an introduction for me. So I went, I've never written nonfiction before. I've only written horror fiction and stories based on real things. And so that was, I pitched that to a publisher. And lo and behold, they got back to me and said, yeah, we'd love to publish this. In fact, we'd like to do it this fall if you can get us the book in about 3 weeks. And I said, I have to write it now.
No wonder you're staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning.
So I pulled all-nighters to get that book into the publisher. And that was the first of, I did a half a dozen books with that publisher, where I did, Hamilton, which is where I was living at the time. My next one was spooky Sudbury. So Sudbury, Ontario. Sudbury is the nickel capital of the world, the mining town where I grew up. And then I did Ottawa, creepy capital. So Canada's capital city. And I'd lived there for 10 years. I thought, okay, I may as well go to the places I know
places
already.
You're familiar with.
And then I did Tomes of Terror, which is haunted bookstores and libraries, because I'm a gigantic book nerd, if you can't tell.
Me too, Mark. Me too.
These are just the signed books.
I was going to ask you before we started. I bet that's not all of books you have.
Oh, no. So I have like my vanity shelf. So my published books are here.
Yeah.
A little mini. I got a mini me here.
That's so cute.
Oh, there you go.
Mini, yeah. So it's Steve Austin, the wrestler. But you looked enough like me that we put my publishing company is called Stark.
See, that's just the face that you have to put on when the hag comes for you in the middle.
That's right. I have to look mean and menacing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that kind of started off writing about ghost stories. I did haunted hospitals, and then Macabre Montreal. Montreal's Canada's second largest city, based in Quebec. And right now, I'm actually in the process of researching for ghosts of the Great Lakes, and I have to turn that into my publisher by December, because they'll be publishing that next year.
That was something I was going to bring up when you mentioned that Hamilton was near a Great Lake. It seems like there's so much activity around the Great Lakes, and I think most people that are into paranormal things know that like water seems to be some kind of conductive energy, and that's a lot of water those Great Lakes have.
And well, I mean, and I remember, so growing up, I loved reading books about, Bigfoot and UFOs and Loch Ness Monster and all. I loved that stuff. I couldn't get enough of it. A local librarian would say, Mark, we got a new book on Sasquatch. I put it aside for you because they knew I was the guy who wanted that stuff. I had no idea I would write those books later on. But I remember reading something about the Great Lakes Triangle back in the late 70s, early 80s. And I can't find anything still in print about the Great Lakes Triangle, but I'm going to be trying to get some information, obviously, for the Great Lakes book, because that seemed very fascinating.
It is because, well, first off, we put a comment in there from Luz. Luz has just about got me to believe that Michigan might be the most paranormal state. But it was funny because as I was getting the news together this week, I found a bunch of articles about stuff happening in Illinois as well. A lot of new Mothman sightings are happening around Chicago. And I think there's something to that, Jenny, of like the Great Lakes for sure. It was just a couple seasons ago, I was watching one of the newer seasons of kind of the reboot of Unsolved Mysteries. And there was a really great UFO sighting that happened out there with a meteorologist who was like kind of got ran out of his job because of what he saw on the radars there. So it really is, Mark. There's a lot of and like you said, I mean, cryptids, UFOs, ghosts. I know, what is it? Lake Michigan has just hundreds of sunken ships.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, I mean, what an area to be able to kind of get into.
I mean, and Superior, when you think about the depth of Lake Superior as well, and you got to wonder what's potentially down there. We wonder about the oceans, but this is right there. It's between two major landmasses, and and we still don't know. There's so many secrets hidden in the dark depths there.
Wow.
Yeah. So what kind of ghost stories have you collected that specifically, or have you collected any ghost stories that specifically have to do with the lakes themselves so far?
I'm still at the very beginning. What I've done is I've found some articles, I've filed them aside, I've purchased some books, I've put them aside, I've made notes of where I need to visit. I do plan on circumnavigating at least Lake Ontario and Lake Erie.
Nice.
And going to visit, one of my favorite things to do when I do research is to visit the local historic societies and also to visit the local libraries, because the archivists at the libraries are my absolute best friend. I show up and say, I'm working on a book on this. I need all the information you have about ghosts of this, right? And so that's sort of my plan for August, September, October. I'll be too busy running around doing talks and book signings. October for someone like me is my prime time for getting my spook out.
Plus, as a book nerd, you just want to go in all the libraries too.
Well, of course.
Yeah. That's the way I am too. Oh, a library, let's go.
I can't walk by a bookstore, a library, or a brewery without going into it. So.
There we go. We can. Let's go. I'm ready.
Down for it. Yeah.
So Hamilton, and then there was another place you said that you had lived. They were both mining towns. So was there tragedies that happened around mining that caused any paranormal experiences?
So, I grew up in near Sudbury, which is the nickel capital of the world, and there were occasional really horrible tragedies, but the main story that I found from the Levack mine, and Levack is a small community I actually grew up in, about 2,000 people northwest of Sudbury, and it was haunted level 1850. And it wasn't associated with a particular tragedy. It was a story, and I sat down at a local coffee shop with a retired miner.
Oh, fun.
Who just loved talking to kids about the mine, because that was the community. That's what made everything in that community. That's why the city was there. That's why so many people had jobs there and still do. There's the mines are still operational in the town I grew up in. But the one story, because I was looking for ghost stories, was the level 1850. And so this happened in the 1970s, where it was like on the weekend back then, it was like skeleton crew, no pun intended, but it was just very, very limited. And so there was the guy who was the hoist operator for the cage that sent people down. And it was basically just one guy who was going and just patrolling and checking to make sure there were no cave-ins or anything like that. That's kind of what they did. There were no actual active mining going on. And the one guy was down there on level 1850, and over the radio, the hoist operator hears, "Pull the cage up now, pull the cage up now." And he's like, "What's going on?" Because it takes 15 minutes for the cage to get all the way back up to the surface. And he says, "There's someone down here. I can see his eyes."
Oh.
And so by the time, 15 minutes later, and I've actually gone to this mine. My uncle worked there. He took me. I didn't go after I'd heard that, so it was way before. Otherwise, you wouldn't have caught me dead down there. So
there's no flashlight strong enough for that one.
But 15 minutes later, he finally comes up, and the guy's still white as a ghost.
Yikes.
And he said, "There's somebody down there," and he refused to ever go back in that level.
Wow.
He refused. He got a different job at the mine where he could stay on the surface, because there's lots of different roles that don't involve going underground. But he was terrified to go down there because he thought that he had seen something. It was just these glowing eyes in the dark. Now, when I was talking to Hans, this is the retired miner, he said, it's a possible, like they're like the lumber trains and stuff like that it could have been a raccoon, or there could have been something like that in the and you saw from the light on his helmet, he just saw the light shining. But the guy was convinced. He goes, "No, it was adult size. It was right up high.
That's a big
and
raccoon.
It was eyes, and I felt something." And so there's a lot of people, even today, even the miners today, because I was talking to somebody who's a few generations younger than me, and who works at the mine. He goes, "Yeah, there's people still whispering about, like, if you're on level 1850, you got to be careful. Don't go alone."
Wow. Mm-hmm. I wonder if that was a ghost or if it was something that lives down there. Because you were talking about the lakes have all these mysteries because they're so deep, but mines also have,
who knows?
what kind of, who knows what's down there? We don't know.
Yeah. And then the whole thing.
Yeah, something underground that evolved to some sort of different species that's living down there. Who knows?
That would be cool.
Yeah, elementals is one thing I would think that maybe you could run into.
Oh, yeah.
Possibly,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially when you're harvesting such rich material. So the other thing that fascinated me about Sudbury, because it's rich in nickel deposits. So I don't know if you guys know the Sudbury Basin was formed by one of the big meteors that hit the Earth that killed the dinosaurs. Sudbury, yay! So it's a giant meteorite.
Hence all the nickel, I guess.
The entire Sudbury Basin, the valley is basically a giant meteorite.
Wow!
And so where all the deposits are just around that center, and Levack's right on the edge of that. But one of the things that was so fascinating about Sudbury was when I was working on Spooky Sudbury, I co-authored it with Jenny Jellin, who is a journalist who was working in Sudbury, and she had already picked up a few stories of haunted restaurants and stuff like that. So we were co-authoring the book, and so we mapped it out, and we figured out, okay, I'll write this chapter, you write this chapter, and we kind of figured out how we were going to do it. And I thought, okay, I'll do the chapter on UFOs. And when I started to do the research, again, went to the library with a microfiche, and the local archivist was just more than happy to just keep bringing me stuff. There were 4 chapters on UFOs. I had to divide it up into the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and then the 80s and beyond. 4 chapters and then sort of an additional one. And I was like, whoa, because the 70s in particular, Sudbury was a hotbed of UFO activity. And there's a few theories to that. If this is a part of the Earth that's rich in deposits of these elements, these these natural resources that are very important, that could be what's attracting them there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it was in 1975 or 1977. I can't remember. I'd have to look it up. But this was when the U.S. Air Force actually sent 3 fighter pilots up to Sudbury to intercept 3 unknown And again, at the time, they probably thought it was Russian,
Yeah.
whatever.
Mhm.
But when I actually saw the report that was about 80% redacted,
Of course.
you can flip through the report and it's just all redacted, like everything's redacted. And you're kind of like, what the hell happened over Sudbury?
Yeah.
I mean, I was a kid
Wow.
at the time, but I remember it being a big deal. Like the U.S. Air Force comes up to like northern Ontario, not right on the border, but several hours north. They must have been something major.
Absolutely.
Well, going back to what we did earlier, talking about the news, when we were talking about, what's going on with the Senate, but the congressional hearings and all I guess you can kind of hear by the tone of my voice there, I get excited. It's, they're talking about it, but in the back of your mind, I mean, we've been waiting for disclosure for how many years? And if it hasn't come yet, I don't know if it's ever going to happen.
Yeah.
But, because I mean, that's the problem is you have these really, big verified events, and then all this information's redacted. And why is it being redacted? Why is it being redacted? Cold War, of course. But then when you find out that these things are traveling faster than anything the United States, military could even hope of creating, you're like, why is that being redacted? And so I don't know. Like, I was very much an optimist, and the more that I do this show when it comes to UFOs and we get to talk to people, it's just like, man, I really don't know if we're going to get the answers that we wanted.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I still go back to Hamlet, and I think about there being more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophies.
Yeah.
And there's so much we can't explain. Yeah. And I wonder, like, what's the purpose of keeping stuff from the general public? Is it to prevent mass panic?
Mm-hmm.
That's one.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I always forget the name of the report that was commissioned in the 1960s. That basically said that if they were to, the U.S. government hired an outside firm to come together, do a report on that, and it basically said that it would break down people's worldviews and cause chaos in the streets. That
was in the 1960s. This is a long time ago now. Can we do another one of those?
I don't think it would react the same way, maybe, as our society would have in the 1960s, but I don't know if it's changed enough that it's not an issue. I don't know. But, one of the, we had Michael Schratt on the program, who is someone who deals with research that's been done about recovering UFOs, like craft and possible bodies and things like that. And it was interesting because we had him on the show. He's like, do you just kind of want to start at the beginning of UFO retrievals? And I was like, oh yeah. We'll just do we'll kind of start our way from the beginning. And by like the end of the show, we had maybe just gotten to the 1950s. And one of the last ones we did was Roswell. And so there were
Roswell
was like after a long period.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There was
and that was when our show was 2 hours long.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was very interesting because even someone like me who, kind of pokes around at this stuff quite a bit, I didn't realize there was that many, government documents talking about recoveries dating all the way back to the early 1900s. Wow. And it's like, man, there's got to be something to it. Like, I don't know.
Cynthia's wondering how we're all feeling about what's going on in the Ute Mountain in Utah. Are you talking about the what's the name of that show? Skinwalker Ranch? Is that what you're talking about, Cynthia?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know what the new things are that's happening with Skinwalker Ranch. We had watched
there's some
of those series
going on. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. All my news consumption is microplastics. So.
There's some weird stuff going on there, Cynthia. I know that much. Seems like it's a little bit of everything. Okay, so there was another question I was thinking of that just fell out of my head. Oh, I wanted to go on to, because since I'm also a book nerd, about the haunted bookstores and libraries. Whenever I think of things like that, I always think of the Ghostbusters scene with the ghost librarian, right?
One of the best scenes. Yeah.
She's like, shh. So what's some fun stories that you found for bookstores and libraries?
Some of the bookstores and libraries, sadly, a lot of the bookstores I'd written about were no longer around.
Oh, boo!
They had closed down. I know, but some of the libraries are still around. There's an interesting one that actually connects back to Montreal in Canada, and it is Lincoln. There's a cloth with the blood of Lincoln.
Oh,
that is in a memorial case there. And occasionally Lincoln is seen walking in this Montreal library. And so one of the other ones was a custodian, a dead custodian. I can't even, here's the thing is I have to go back, I have to flip through the book and go, what state was that in?
Yeah. Well, you don't have to remember where and all.
Yeah.
But like, you remember the good juicy part.
Yeah. The custodian the custodian's ghost who's only seen on the lower level, which is where the children's bookstore was. But one of the most fascinating ones was here, not too far from Hamilton, was the Dundas Library. And it was, they've now moved to a bigger location, a beautiful location just down the street. But it was this beautiful old building, and it used to be a mansion. And at this location, they actually had the family tombstones that were in the yard when they recovered it. And the woman's name is half of her name is missing. And so her belief that, I think Marilyn was her name, that she's doing practical jokes just so people don't forget her. Don't forget who she was. And the tombstones are hung on the wall right by the elevators. And I was there one October, as I often am, going to visit some local libraries and do talks about some of the local hauntings and stuff. And the staff there, because I'd written about the libraries, the elevators would go on and off on their own. Didn't matter how many times they came in to be looked at. They couldn't figure out what was wrong. There was nothing wrong with the electronics. They placed everything, and the elevators would just go on their own. And we're up there. They closed the library because it was a special event. People had to, it was like a free ticket and they had to come. They closed the library, turned all the lights down. And I was up it was in the kids section on the second floor. And I was just around the corner from where the elevator was. And, earlier in the evening, the staff were like, yeah, it still happens all the time. And as I'm up there telling the story about this library, just as I'm finishing talking about this one experience that this one woman had, where she was alone and opened it and was expecting to see someone there, and there was nobody in the elevator. You hear the elevator ding, and I see the one staff member, her eyes just go like saucers. And I was kind of like, it just happened, didn't it? And she's like, yeah, it just happened. I was like, okay, she's listening.
Yeah, we have had our own elevator experience before.
Actually work in a building where that happens on a regular basis right now. Yeah.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll hear it go bing, and then it'll open, and there's nobody there. I'm like, hey,
Did something just get off and I just can't see?
Yeah.
See, I wonder about that. I mean, I always wonder about that because I love beer. I'll enjoy wine and stuff like that. But somebody tastes the beer or tastes the wine and says, oh, this has notes of cherry and tropical whatever, and it has an essence of whatever and all these things. And I'm like, it tastes good or it's sweet or it's hoppy. That's all I got. And I wonder if there are certain people whose tastes are so refined that they can detect these things. Like a master chef or whatever.
Yeah.
There must be, obviously, as a medium, this. There are people who can see things that the rest of us just can't see. We're not in tune with it.
Yeah.
There's lots going on right around us that we have no clue.
Absolutely.
Not just atoms and those plastics that we're consuming all the time.
Yeah. And I think some of it too is just learning to listen and learning to go with it. I feel like a lot of people, because I've had my own experiences with hauntings before, and I think the thing that I've taken from it just personally was that it's really, really easy to try to explain it away. And it's really easy to say, I don't know, almost to like pretend it never happened. You know, like it actually makes me think of like stories like a Stephen King story or something where it's like they forget what happened in their childhood because they just like, but it almost kind of does happen that way. It's like, you know, I've seen something and been like, there's no way that that just happened. So like, and my brain just kind of like goes into override, you know, like it just erases it and rewrites data on
It's
top
way
of it.
easier.
You know?
Yeah, let's just pretend. But we
And
do
so-
that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think a lot of people could have experiences that they just kind of don't want to recognize, you know?
Yeah, or sometimes it's the old thing where it's like, well, grandma doesn't ever talk about that. She said it once, she got
Yeah.
out of her system. She never wants to talk about it again because she doesn't want to think about the repercussions of what she saw.
Mhm.
And that's really hard because I'm the guy who wants the story so I can share it in my
Or,
one of
you
my
know,
books.
then there's the people who are like, I don't believe in all that. But then this one time.
One time.
Yeah. And everybody's got
my buddy's house.
Everybody's got a one-time story.
His family had an old log cabin that they used to summer vacation at, and I went up there with them for the weekend, and I was out sitting, you know, and all of a sudden you get this story, you know, and you're like, so I thought you didn't believe any of this stuff.
Yep.
Well, you know,
Well, except this one time, yeah.
Except that one
It's the
time.
exception
Yeah.
that proves the rule. So, one of the things that's so interesting is when I do research, I do try. I do my research with an open mind. I am a believer, but I like to be skeptical because I'll be honest with you, there were so many stories about bookstores where, and the books fell over all on their own. It's like, well, I've worked in bookstores my whole life and it gets humid here in the summer. And guess what happens? Books are made out of paper. Paper absorbs water and they expand. I don't know if you ever noticed that in the summertime, the mass markets will expand and they'll just flop on their own. So it's not spooky. It's just physics. Right. So it's like, well, I'm not going to write about that. But there was this one incident in the kids section where you walk through the kids section to get to the back room where the staff room is, where they do the receiving and stuff like that, where the staff member goes to the back room to grab a special order that had just come in and there's no one in the kids section and was only gone for 30 seconds and came back. And all of the Goosebumps books that were on the shelf hadn't just fallen over, but they were all stacked in the dead center of the section. There was no one around, and it was like 30 seconds in and out the back door, and all of a sudden, all the Goosebumps books were like there, and you're like, who did that?
Wow.
Did I pass out when I was in the back room?
And it just
and like you don't get an
happened to be
explanation.
the Goosebumps book.
Yeah.
Had to be Goosebumps, of course, because those were the best sellers at the time.
Unless there was a missing time incident where she was really abducted by ETs. Now we're getting
you never
too
know,
far out
right?
there.
Like,
yeah.
I mean, sometimes we assume missing time.
Yeah.
I can share a story of what happened with my wife and I once, actually. And she's a non-believer. She does not believe. So she's brave. She's like in there and I'm hiding, you know. Like we were on Ghost Walk in one of the most haunted buildings in Canada, which is a Carleton jail. And they spelled jail in the old Gaelic sense. That's how old this was. And it's a bed and breakfast. You can go there, and for $38 a night, you can stay in one of the old jail cells.
Oh my goodness.
And Liz wanted to stay there, and I'm like, no way, I'm not staying. I'll be in the Novotel across the street with all the lights on. You can go stay in a haunted jail cell. But anyways, we're on the tour. And I'm in the middle of all the people because if anyone's going to pick people off, I'm going to be protected by them, you know. And Liz is taken off because she's like, I want to see the faceless woman on the 4th floor in the women's washroom. And she's running off to the washroom by herself. I'm like, you're going to die. Anyways, we're coming back from, we were in Orlando. I was there for a writer's conference. And we were driving back up. It's a several-day drive to get back up to Ontario. But I had just released Haunted Hospitals. And I co-authored that with Rhonda Parrish. And so, again, I only wrote half the chapters. I only proofread her chapters. I didn't do the in-depth research. But one of the chapters she wrote was Weston, West Virginia, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. And so I didn't know much about it other than what I read. So I didn't know all the background. So I was so excited because at 9 in the morning, they had the tour of the wing for the criminally insane. And I'm like, oh, we're going to go on the tour. It'll be so much fun. And thank God this was during daylight hours.
Yeah.
But anyways, we're driving and we wanted to get all the way from Orlando to Weston, West Virginia, which is 14, 15 hour drive straight. And so we left in the morning, and it was like 1 a.m. We're finally getting into town. I'm kind of excited because we're going to be going on this tour the next morning. We're exhausted. Liz is driving. We pull into this one hotel, and the parking lot is packed. And it's in the mountains, and it's, of course, it's foggy and all the things. So I run in and I was like, "Do you have any rooms?" "No, but there's an Econo Lodge just a couple miles down the highway. They might have room." So get back in the car and we go. And I get to the Econo Lodge. It's packed again. And I run in and I said, "Do you have any rooms?" And they go, "Well, yeah, we have one, but." And of course I'm on high alert, but it's just 2 double beds. We don't have a king or a queen. I'm like, we're just going to sleep, man. We just need, like as Steve Martin says in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, 4 wheels in a seat. I just want a bed. So we take the room, we go in, we get our stuff, and Liz takes the bed by the bathroom. I take the one by the door. And she falls asleep. Like, she puts her hoodie on, puts it over her head, she rolls over, and she's out in 30 seconds because we have to get up in a few hours and go on this tour. And it takes me a long time because I'm a chicken, right? And it's a scary place. And when we had stayed in Virginia on our trip down, she had picked a really, really, really crappy, inexpensive hotel. And it was one of the ones where it wasn't necessarily the ghost, but I was just afraid of the clientele. I actually pulled the couch in front of the door.
We've stayed in some of those.
The bed sheets. We brought things in from the car to sleep in, like that kind of place, because I was afraid someone was going to break in. And it's the same because it's a motel room, so it was the same place, the same sort of not the same place, but the same layout. And I'm laying in bed. Liz is asleep. And it takes me forever to get to sleep. I finally get to sleep, and then I wake up, and I hear feet shuffling. I open my eyes, and I see Liz walking around the edge of her bed, going towards the bathroom. And I'm laying there, and I'm waiting for her to turn on the light. And I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and then I hear a snore from the bed. And I sat up, and I went, "Oh my God. Oh my God, there's a woman in the room." And I freak out. I grab my phone, put the flashlight out, I get the phone, and I'm shining, and I'm checking, and the latch is still on the door. And I'm like, "Oh, what the heck?" And there's no one's in the room. But I could have sworn I saw a woman walking around her bed.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then I said, okay, I finally convinced myself. And Frosty, you said this, is that, that time, missing time. Or I think, or Jenny, did you say the missing time?
Yeah.
And I thought, here's what happened. I woke up, I saw Liz get up and go to the bathroom. I fell asleep. 5 minutes passed. I thought a second passed. That happens, right?
Yeah.
Right? And then no problem. Okay, cool. So I finally convinced myself that's what it was, that it wasn't a woman in the room. And then the next thing, I wake up to this on the counter, something dropped on the counter across from my bed where my laptop bag is, where our passports are. And again, I'm like, oh my God, there's someone in the room going through our stuff. And again, I check the flashlight and I check and I've made the mistake, by the way, of waking Liz up when I'm scared. I don't do that anymore. I know better because she's the brave one and she can't get back to sleep. So again, I check the door, it's still latched. And then I go, oh, the door between our rooms. And I check that, it's locked. And I was thinking, what the heck? There's someone in our room? I keep thinking, and I was thinking, no, maybe upstairs someone dropped something. That's what it was, right? Again, convince myself not to happen. We get up in the morning. I finally got a couple hours sleep. We get up in the morning and we're getting ready. And I was like, hey, Liz, how'd you sleep? Oh, pretty good. I didn't get up once. I was like, are you sure? It's like, no, I didn't get up once. And I was like, no, seriously, like you got up and went to the washroom. She's like, no, I just was out and I didn't get out of bed at all. And so then I tell her what I saw. And she's the non-believer. Her face goes white when I tell her what happened. And she said, well, I wasn't going to say anything because I thought maybe it was a dream, but she's laying there with a hoodie over her head, facing the wall. And she feels at a certain point, she wakes up, this feels like someone's standing over her. And then she feels a hand touch her shoulder. And she said, it wasn't my hand. It was a woman's hand. It was like a soft, gentle woman's hand on her shoulder. And she's the brave one. She's the feisty one. So she gets ready and she's about to just swing. And there's no one there. And that freaked her out.
Wow.
And she's like, oh my God, there was a woman standing over me and she touched me, but then there was no one there. And so
Wow.
had I not shared with her what
She would have just kept it to herself.
I
Yeah.
know. And that was the thing. That was the only time I've ever seen her actually go, I think there was a woman in the room. And actually, the strange thing was, it was daylight by the time we were talking about this. We didn't feel scared. We felt sorry for her. We felt like there was a woman in this room and maybe she's lonely and she can't leave.
Yeah.
Like what else does she got to do but walk around and touch people and go through our stuff, right?
Well, I guess that is the benefit that I have being married to the medium is I get the backstory of it. So it's not just the spooky bump in the night, right? Like, although, I mean, it still is that way though. I mean, you don't always, I mean, a lot of times that we've dealt with hauntings, we never really got the answer.
No.
Yeah. And I looked into it. I checked with the staff and the owners, and nobody else had reports that I know of had reported anything happening in that room. Because there are some hotels where they're like, oh, you saw Sandy, right? Like, and you hear the stories like, oh no, that's Sandy. She's just there. She doesn't mean any harm. She's just doing her thing. Or whatever.
So many people coming and going at a place like that. I guess there's all kinds of energy that could happen, especially if it doesn't have the best reputation.
Well, is a ghost necessarily the spirit of the departed, or is it a strong psychic energy that somebody left there because of something that happened?
Well, another very interesting thing too, I was going to bring up earlier when we were talking about the mind is you almost just need that story, because we've been talking a lot on this show lately about, creating, hauntings, just by people putting that energy into the place over time. And, people have, that's something that a lot of paranormal investigators are investigating now, is this idea of, I'm blanking on the word, Jenny.
Thought forms.
Yeah, of just kind of people, going in. There was no little girl named Lily who lived at this plantation, but for 20 years
we're
now,
interacting with her. Yeah.
20 years, people have been talking to Lily, trying to get her to touch this doll. And now all of a sudden, someone has an EVP that says, my name is Lily. Why does that happen?
Egregore is the other term.
Yeah.
Egregore.
Yeah.
But I mean, think about that. All of these, I mean, the mind is so powerful. All of these people projecting their energy towards something. I mean, if you just go with basic physics, right? Nothing comes from nothing, that there has to be like a pull and push and pull. That's a part of that push and pull. That's a part of the energy that's being fed. Again, we don't know. We don't know. That's the beautiful thing about it, is that we can still explore this with our eyes wide open in wonder and awe, and speculate. I mean, that again, that's one of the reasons I love writing. I love fiction and doing the nonfiction, because a lot of the times I end the chapter saying, I don't know, can't explain this. We tried to explain it, but it doesn't seem to be physics that we know.
And I guess to a certain extent, I mean, I guess you always want the answers really deep inside, but I don't know if we really do, when it comes to the paranormal and supernatural and the unexplained. It's that little bit of magic, because not only did I like the spooky, but I liked Tolkien, and I liked Lord of the Rings, and I liked, King Arthur, and just this idea that there can be something more to this world.
Right.
I think is part of what the supernatural and paranormal kind of pull me into. And so if I found out that there was a scientific explanation for energy, and that, this was a capability that energy had, I don't know if it would be as cool anymore, And I imagine as an author, that would take away some of the room you have when you're writing your, fiction, to be able to devise what's going on.
Well, I have to
possibly,
understand. Right? There's still magic rules, right? Like I have a series, A Canadian Werewolf in New York, and I have paranormal entities, but they all have to follow certain rules of magic, right? There's certain things that can and can't happen based on the legend, or based on the paranormal experience. So at least for me as a writer, I have to know what those rules are. So when I'm writing a story, I make sure I follow them, because there's going to be readers that get, wait a second, you said that it doesn't change until 75%, the moon is 75% full. It was only 74% that night.
But you got to make up those rules, right?
I did.
You made up your own rules. Yeah. It'd be different if somebody was like, this is exactly what it is. Yeah. It's about the seeking. The seeking and the searching is the fun part.
Yeah.
Rusty, we're at 9:09. Do you want to kind of reset for us before we
are going to reset?
Wrap up the last 30-ish minutes?
Real quick, I do want to mention for everybody that, I get to hang out with Medium Jenny Lee here on Monday nights with the Witching Hours. And a lot of you also come hang out with Medium Jenny Lee on Friday nights, but you can also find her on mediumjennylee.com, and you can go there and you can purchase all kinds of things. You can do a private session, or even go check out her YouTube, where she has a whole lot of stuff. Well, you just put up a video over there about the Raw Contact, the second book, right? So that's up on YouTube. So go check it out. Your journey into the weird is just a click away. So mediumjennylee.com. If you are just joining us, or if you've joined us since the beginning of the show, we are joined tonight by Mark Leslie, author, and we are talking about, we're talking about a lot of stuff tonight. We're talking about all kinds of paranormal. We've gotten to just about all the different sections of that, and we're having a great conversation. And I wanted to let you guys know, if you have a question, we do have about 20 minutes left in the program. So if you have a question, feel free to throw that in chat, and we will get that over to Mark. I guess I also wanted to mention, if you were listening in another time and another place, we will have listed below the link to find Mark Leslie, markleslie.ca. That'll be listed in the description below. You can just click on that and be whisked away over to Mark Leslie on the web. And for all of you who are in chat, that is pinned to the top of chat, so you can go check out all the stuff over there on Mark Leslie's website. All right. So I guess there's a lot of things I want to talk about, but I don't want to get too far out into the woods on some of this stuff. I wanted to go back to when you started writing as an author. Were there any specific authors and stuff like that when it came to horror, paranormal, that really that you gravitated to when you first started getting into it?
Well, I mean, as most people who are into horror, Stephen King's obviously going to be right up there. But there were classic Ray Bradbury stories, even Isaac Asimov short stories. So I read science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And Richard Lehman was a huge one for me, although a lot of his horror is real world horror, not necessarily, although One Rainy Night has paranormal elements in it. And Ado Van Belkom, who's a Canadian horror author, he was a writer who I'd read his short stuff. There was a series published here in Canada, edited by Don Hutchison, called Northern Frights, and it was all Canadian horror. So again, I'm a fan and friend of Kelly Armstrong as well, and I love her Women of the Otherworld series. She's just a genius writer. So Something Wicked This Way Comes, Priestess of Wonderland said, that one from Ray Bradbury as well. But some of the short stories from Bradbury as well were just so stunning, because what you can do in such a short time, such a short period of time with a story can really scare you. And there was a collection of short stories, and honestly, it was all different authors, and I can't even remember the name of it. But I just remember picking it up, and just every single story scared the crap out of me. And I was like, I want to do that. I mean, my very first published horror story, Phantom Mitch, was inspired by the phenomenon of the Phantom Itch, right? Somebody loses a limb, and then they feel an itch on the leg that doesn't exist anymore. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting if this guy is in this car accident and he loses his left arm and his wife, and they're both in the other world. His left arm, he can feel an itch, but he also can feel Mitch holding his hand. And he was driving the car. It was a drunk driving incident and stuff like that. So it was called Phantom Mitch because her name was Michelle and her nickname was Mitch, and I can't resist a play on words. And that was my first published horror story. which did receive honorable mention in the year's best fantasy and horror. And I think it worked really, really well because I took a phenomenon that we've heard about, we've read about, it's in scientific journals and stuff like that, and they can't explain what the phantom itch is. I'm like, well, what if the arm's in the other world and he can reach things and touch things with that arm, but he also lost his eye. So as the story goes on, now he's starting to see things that most of us can't see because he's now seeing into the other world. And that's when it gets really horrific for the poor guy. Because I mean, she didn't die in a good way.
Oh,
so
yeah. Wow.
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept, and it's like you said, it kind of comes down to a lot of times good fiction has to be connected, has to have a string to reality, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, even a good ghost story, you know, there's layers of fictionalizing to make the story work better. And I know this from one UFO story I got for Spooky Sudbury, where somebody had filled out a form on my website and said, I got to share this story. And he gave me like 3 lines of text. And I'm like, well, I can't do a chapter. So I asked him some more questions. They said, well, okay, you saw a UFO when you were 17, you were hunting. Okay. What was it? He's like, well, it was my very first hunting trip. And I was there and it was October and blah, 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 blah. And then he described a few more things. So then I wrote this whole chapter and I had it like, I've been on my first hunting trip. As you know, of course they're going to mock me. Of course they're going to make fun of me. Of course there's going to be fart jokes if it's a bunch of guys. And so I had this whole dialogue and this whole story of this guy is already terrified and nervous because they're going to prank him. And then they all wake up in the UFO and they talk to each other and all the things they said that I just made up the dialogue. So I sent him the chapter and said, okay, I embellished a little. Please tell me where I went wrong. Help me fix this. And he comes back to me and he goes, oh my God, it's like you were there. And all I was doing,
jokes and everything.
Yeah.
All I was doing was saying, well, what's likely to have happened here? Well, they're likely to have made fun of him. Oh, they're likely to have been playing poker. Oh, they're likely to have, held him down and farted in his face, like all the things that guys do, right? Coming of age, and what do you call it? Initiation and stuff like that. And then, of course, when because the UFOs lit up the whole sky, and then you couldn't hear crickets or birds or any of the creatures at night, like it was just lit up like afternoon. And the dialogue they had with one another, I'd made it up, but it was very much, what would you say? So that was but that comes back down to, even when you're telling a true story, there's some embellishment that makes it more of a story rather than just a blow-by-blow bullet list of then this happened.
Yeah.
The thing you made me think about when you were talking about that is the same thing that's happening kind of like with paranormal television right now, with like ghost hunting TV shows and stuff. Like, I've done enough paranormal investigation to know that just following me and Jenny on a paranormal investigation isn't going to be the best TV.
It's like fishing. You sit there for a long time.
Yeah. There's a lot of, I found out really quick that I don't do long EVP sessions anymore, because after I'd done 2 or 3 of them, I realized I had 4 hours of audio I had to sit through and listen to nothing. And it's like, but who's got time for that? Like, so I mean, there has to be, you got to have the greatest hits kind of a little bit to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So I get it. Yeah. Well, did you have anything, Jenny?
We haven't talked about haunted hospital stories yet. What's some good haunted hospital ones you've got?
So one of the best ones that appeared in haunted hospitals was when I was on George Noory's Coast to Coast AM talking.
Cool.
Up till 3 a.m, get scared while everyone else is sleeping because I'm there sharing stories. And I remember my wife was sleeping in the other room, and I'm sitting in the down the hall all by myself and doing the show. And we were talking about Tomes of Terror, the haunted bookstores and libraries. And then it was the call-in portion of the show. And somebody had called in and shared a story that I ended up putting in because the producer put me in contact with them after. I was like, nice. I got to talk to this person because I'm working on haunted hospitals right now. Anyways, this takes place in Alberta, Canada. Again, I'm giving you all the Canadian content here.
You are. I love it.
And this was at they were working as an orderly at this asylum where they had a lot of patients who were kind of there for life. And they weren't able to take care of themselves. And some of them were violent in terms of their outbursts and stuff like that. And there was this one woman who was there, and she had been there her whole life. Weird things had happened to her. So she would be in a room and suddenly she would say, complain about being so cold, so cold, so cold. And the heat would be working properly, but you walk into the room and it's like an ice box.
Wow.
And then they'd move her to another room, and lo and behold, the next room would be an ice box. That would happen. Sometimes when she had panicked and thought that someone was attacking her, she had this superhuman strength and would throw people off her. Wow. You'd have 4 or 5 people trying to hold her down. She was not a big woman.
Wow.
And 4 or 5 big guys trying to hold her down, and she would just toss them like they were puppets, whatever. So the one night he's doing the rounds, and she's in her room, and he's walking down the corridor, and he can hear she's talking to someone. There's these voices. She hears 2 voices. He walks into the room, and he hears the voices, and the voices stop immediately when he opens the door. And he opens the door, and he steps into the room, and as his eyes adjust, he sees she's standing about 4 feet up, her feet on the wall, facing into the door, into the middle of the room. Her hair's hanging down over her face. And he just backs out of the room slowly, closes the door, and never told anyone again.
Oh my God.
Until this show. So he told me this story. So I get a hold of that. The show ends, and I talk to the producer, and I said, "Can you get me this guy's phone number? I'm doing research, whatever." So we finally connect about 3 weeks later. Somebody was listening to the show who also worked there.
Oh, wow.
And recognized his voice. He didn't use his real name, and nor did I in the story. I do protect my, protect the witnesses and make up, it's like Leslie, he or him, it's Leslie, I don't know, or Pat, whatever, right? I try not to identify them if they don't want to be identified anyway. And then the colleague of his actually had experienced something very similar around the same time period. We also heard voices and walked into the room and saw her standing, but she was upright, except she was about a foot off the floor.
Oh, wow.
And she was staring straight at him, but she was obviously sleeping, but her eyes were straight open. And again, didn't say anything until they had heard him share this story. So again, this is a situation where 2 different people had experienced something. We talked about that before. Experienced something, but said, no, they're going to think I'm crazy. I'm not gonna whatever. And so I guess he felt he heard George and I talking, and he's like, I'm gonna share this story. Wow. And that's my favorite story from haunted hospitals, because I heard the story, it freaked me out so much. And I remember I was at Superstars writing seminars in Colorado Springs. I go to this conference every February. And as I always host a haunted parlor where you kind of sit around and we drink and I tell some scary stories. And there was one of the writers was also an artist, has this really cool sketch of the woman standing on the wall. I still have it, and it just freaks me out just to see it. and I finished the story and whatever. And at the end, he hands me this. He's like, "Here, I sketched this while you were talking." I was like, "Oh, that's so freaky, man. That's exactly how I pictured it."
Wow.
Dang. I wonder if she was possessed by a demon. That's what was happening with her.
The belief was that she was possessed.
Wow.
The chapter's called "The Woman Possessed," actually. So that was the theory. Yeah, is that we had no idea what it was that was causing this to happen. And again, the 2 different voices that they consistently heard coming from a room when she was there by herself.
That's really an awful story, though, because if the woman was not really crazy and she was just possessed, then something could have been done.
What are you going to do?
Maybe
what are you going to do about
an exorcist, or she needed to be blessed, or whatever, right? So that's not
and especially considering, I don't know how long ago that was. It might be a little bit easier now, but getting an exorcism and all while the person's in a hospital, probably going to make that even harder.
Yeah.
Rather than it being in a home or something like that, that would be really, really difficult. But wow. And then leave it up. Man, to get that story on Coast to Coast AM also. There you go. It's always good for some good call-ins, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like every time I go on Coast to Coast, I'm like, what new story am I going to get from a listener today?
Yeah.
Just makes you think, though, like how many other people worked there that also had some similar experience with her and didn't tell anybody either.
Well, they don't listen to the show, so they
would have never known.
Yeah, they would have never known.
Somebody else, right?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, these things happen. These things happen. And I mean, that you just hear so many, especially, once you get into the paranormal, and I'm sure I imagine it's this way for you too. Obviously the call-ins you got there, but once you start talking about this publicly more often, you realize how many other people have had experiences. I mean, this isn't, the mainstream. And like I said, I often have to be a little bit contrarian also. Like I have to be, I have to, like, you can't run away with these things. But on the other hand, the more I talk about these things, it's like there are a lot of people who've had some kind of experience, whether that's ghosts or whatever. And a lot of them, they don't come out and talk about it publicly for obvious reasons, because they don't want to be called a crackpot, Yeah. But
I mean, it's the one thing when you look across cultures and different groups of people from around the world, no matter where, there are very similar legends. And you're like, where does this come from? Not just our speculation and our wonder of what's out there. So there's got to be something to it.
One of the coolest things I've ever seen was this mask that was at a museum, and it went all the way. I mean, I don't know the date, and I feel bad because I'm an historian and I can't remember, but it went thousands of years back, and it was like it was from Asia, and it was like this ancient demonologist, like demon exorcist mask, and it was just almost like a stone helmet. Like that's what it looked like, with like circle eyes, and basically, like, I don't even know if it was so old. I don't even think like you would never necessarily know the culture, but somehow they had identified that this thing was used to do exorcism, like going all the way into the like Paleolithic era.
Wow.
And it was like, holy smokes. And like that thing's just sitting in a case and I'm staring at it. And like especially then, like I didn't know anything about like, having extra senses and stuff, but you could just feel an aura just coming off of that thing. And it's like, man, like this is, like you said, this is, this goes across cultures and it goes across time. It's something that people were talking about. We know from the Neolithic period to the earliest writings that we still talk about and discuss today, Now we just use ChatGPT to help us out.
Yeah, ChatGPT to have those hallucinations for us. Right?
Yeah, good Lord. Well, we're at the last few minutes.
Yeah.
What you were talking a little bit about one of the books you're getting ready to work on, but what else do you have in the works?
I am working on the next book in my Canadian werewolf series. The last one was only Monsters in the Building, where I had him seeing the therapist with other monsters, because he's a alpha wolf but a beta male, so he struggles with his dual identity. And this one is the first novel in the series is called A Canadian Werewolf in New York, because I want to do the play on words on American Werewolf in London, because I have to. Fear and Longing in Los Angeles is one of the titles too, because I can't resist. So the latest one, book 8 in the series I'm working on, is called A Canadian Werewolf in London, Ontario, because he comes back to Ontario to his roots. And then I'm also working on, I do movie trivia guides. So I have a book on planes, trains, and automobiles. It's the cover of the book John Candy is reading. If you've ever seen Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Yes.
So
Canadian
he's reading
Mounted.
a book called The Canadian Mounted. So I use the same cover, but it's trivia. I also have a book called Yippee Ki-Yay MF, which is about Die Hard. And then last year I released Merry Christmas, the crapper was full.
Wonderful.
He says,
Yeah.
Excellent.
So I'm kind of hooked on 80s movies as well. That's a non-paranormal writing that I do, which is
We're
We're
obsessed
right
with
there with you.
Christmas
Right there with you.
Vacation. We quote
Yeah.
that one all year long.
yeah.
It's the gift that keeps on giving,
Are
Clark.
you serious? Are you serious, Jenny?
Okay, last couple minutes. We got 2 minutes left. So you go do stuff and starting in the fall. Where
Yeah.
are some places that people can find you, and what are you doing?
Well, Haunted Hamilton, which was my very first paranormal book published 13 years ago, was chosen as the one book, one community. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a library will pick a book that everyone in the community is supposed to read. So Haldimand County,
Oh, cool.
which is between Hamilton and Niagara in Ontario, they've picked Haunted Hamilton.
Oh,
so I'm going to
wow.
be doing a lot of stuff related to Haunted Hamilton. Lucky 13 years ago, this was published. I'll be doing stuff in the Haldimand County. I'm also going to be at Salt Lake Fan Expo. I'm a judge of Writers of the Future, so I'm going to be at their booth at Salt Lake. I'm going to be at Author Nation in Vegas in November, talking about the business of writing and publishing as well.
Cool.
And what else? Other things I can't even remember where I'm going to be.
And where can everybody find you on the interwebs?
markleslie.ca, because the .com was taken by some rich guy, tech guy. So I had to go with the .ca domain. But you'll be able to tell because you'll see me and you'll see my skeleton Barnaby Bones on that website.
Yay. And for everybody that's on Twitch, it's pinned at the top. Everybody that's listening later, it'll be in the description box, wherever you're listening to this podcast.
All right. Well, it was really great talking to you, Mark. We had a great time tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Always a good time talking to you too.
Thank you.
All right, guys, real quick, just to give you an update on what we have coming up. We are going to be at Paracon in Waterbury, Connecticut this Saturday. We're going to try a live stream at 3:00 and bring you guys some guests.
p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
We won't be live next Monday because we will be driving back from Connecticut.
Yes.
The next week, we'll have Steve Dills on from Transcend Paranormal. And the week after that, the last show of July, we're going to have Michael Stratt on. Once again, we talked about him earlier to talk about some more UFO recovery.
Pick up where we left off.
UFO news.
Maybe we'll make it to the 60s by the time.
No, Roswell will take a full hour, won't it?
Yeah.
There we go. All right. So for all you who are listening to us at another place and another time, we will see you all next time.